AGMA Emerging Technology webinar series. Today, we will be talking about making sense of the current automotive landscape. My name is Jenny Blackford. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for AGMA. This meeting is being recorded. For those of you on the live event, please put your questions directly into the chat. For those of you listening on demand, please send any follow-up questions to Doran, D-O-R-A-N, @agma.org, and she will work to get you answers from the presenter. This webinar series has been made possible by generous donations from our members. Special thanks today to Lee Bear, Vector Companies, Star SU, and Gleason. Today's presenter is Joe McCabe, President and CEO of AutoForecast Solutions. Joe leverages decades of industry experience and knowledge to provide production forecasting, advisory services, and business intelligence solutions to the global automotive community. He is responsible for managing the global vehicle powertrain and drivetrain forecasting operations, as well as the development and deployment of AFS's proprietary business intelligence software solutions. Thank you, Joe, for being here today, and welcome back to the AGMA and ABMA audience.
Thank you, Jenny, and everyone attending. I appreciate the time. Okay, so let's dive in. I think there's lots of talk about, and as Jenny said, we forecast basically every vehicle in the world for the next decade, who builds it, where, when, and how many, monthly level detail, but more importantly, the support of the so what and the why. Myself and my team leads have been doing this for 30 years, so we bring a lot of thick skin to the game. A lot of, there may be governmental pushes, there may be environmental agendas, but at the end of the day, the consumers drive this market. And there is a lot of things to talk about that's going on that's impacting the consumers up to and including at this minute. So I want to dive in, and we will have some dialogue at the end if you want to jump in. So every time I do this presentation, I like to set a baseline. And the baseline sort of says, where were we, where are we, and where are we going? So when you look at it from a global perspective, there's currently 60 countries that are building vehicles all over the world, light vehicles. That's across 6 regions, but let's call it 7 major regions if you break out China as itself. So North and South America, East and Western Europe, Asia Pacific, Middle East Africa, and like I said, breaking out China as its own sort of juggernaut in this story. And if you look on the left-hand side, we have our pre-COVID numbers, and then we have our current and our pre and our post-COVID numbers. And the real takeaway here is that no real market that has a substantial amount of growth by the end of our long-term forecast of 2037 other than China. China's goal is going to be an underlying theme of not just, the conversation today, but everything going forward in the automotive space. Pre-Trump, it was a big thing about the competition. Now we're talking about things that are basically tariff impact and how we're trying to remain competitive from a U.S. perspective, but not dilute ourselves on a global landscape. Very difficult balancing act to pull off. So if we dive a little deeper into the weeds of that most of the audience cares about, let's look at North America. When we look at North America, we want to break it obviously into its major components of U.S., Canada, and Mexico. In 2016, we had the most amount of vehicles built ever at 17.8 million units. And this year, we're on target for 15.4. And I'm going to tell you, we're probably going to be dialing that number down. We were sort of hoping there would be some positive conversation on the tariff impact as it impacts at least Canada and Mexico. We're reading the language now, it's not, and we're going to dive into that. But if you look at the forecast window, we don't get back to our high water mark. But the real takeaway here is we look at it from a supplier perspective because most of our clients are just that. The idea is, you may talk about where the VIN on the vehicle is. You maybe talk about the final consumer, but not enough people in the industry, and when you hear all the talking heads, are talking enough about the suppliers. And in reality, if there's no supplier, there's no cars. So when we talk about this idea of tariffs and things like that, we really got to dive into the supplier community and how it feeds into that final product. Well, 14 vehicle manufacturers got the job done in 2016, making the most ever. That's a good mix for suppliers. You have more volume, and you have a standard set of players. If you fast forward to today, we added 10 new manufacturers to the market. So we now have 24, doing more than 2 million units less And that trend continues with growth of manufacturers and a subdued top line. Now that's a problem because manufacturers are saying we need to be competitive, we need to make profit, and the way we usually do that is we cut our costs. So supplier XYZ, you're giving me a widget, you're giving me a certain price. I want that same price. I can't because your volumes now are potentially 30% lower than they were before. Or pile on the fact that a majority of the manufacturers are extending the life cycle of their programs that you didn't plan for this pricing maybe even 8 years ago, because you're all going after things that now that aren't going to start 3 years from today. So this idea of doing things as business as usual doesn't work for the supplier relationship with the OEM anymore. Less volume, more players is the opposite effect of what you want, but it's also the opposite effect of what they need to be competitively priced. And hence, prices go up on everything. If we look at just the shift that happened the last 12 months, 16 vehicle programs. And when you say a vehicle program, remind me, this vehicle program can have more than one vehicle on it. The underpinnings of vehicle in that program that has a platform on top, that's the bigger component of it. 16 of them got pushed out of the forecast window, potentially into 2028, if not further. This is a plum for planning. That's why we update our data every single month. But more importantly, people pick up the phone and go, okay, I heard that Windsor is shutting down for 2 weeks. That we heard just last night into today. Where do you think the impact is? Canada has Oakville and Brampton sort of in the crosshairs of new product. Will new product actually go there because we're talking to them now? Should we allot capacity? Because Ford's telling us 250,000 Lightnings when in reality they could build 20,000 Lightnings. How should we respond to our customers? These are questions we get every single day from our customers or the suppliers. But you got to look at what's really driving this decision of saying, hey, we made a really big decision investment in powertrain like such as BEVs that no one's buying, at least not the volumes we care about. But we got $1 billion in that. We got to recoup that loss. We also are trying to tell our suppliers to give us a shotgun blast of give us ICE and hybrid and BEV products. And we're not going to give you a really good volume because it could be any combination of above. But please, supplier, capacitize for all of it. Very, very difficult problems for the supplier community to go for. But when you constantly see these things being pushed out and you're trying to do 5 and 8 year planning and you're on every month you're seeing programs get moved, very, very difficult in this environment. Now, if we just talk a little about the XEV segmentation across North America, anything with a battery, BEVs, standard hybrids with our CHEVs, meaning no plug, regenerative braking, plug-in hybrids, PHEVs, and extended range. Obviously, crossovers are the big segment. That in North America, that's the entry-level vehicle. Everywhere else in the world, entry-level vehicle is still in that smaller sedan style vehicle, but we don't do a lot of them here anymore. Except for your Asian-based manufacturer, your Japanese or your Korean with entry level and the marquee products of like BMWs coming in. But the Detroit 3 really don't build any cars anymore. It's all crossovers and bigger. So that's our new entry level spot. And obviously, we're going to see the penetration rate then is in these spaces. But we're telling people to pay attention to extended range. Extended range is going to be this new sort of smokescreen in the industry. It basically says, look, I'm going to marry a internal combustion engine as a generator only to a battery powered vehicle. Now, technically on paper, it's a zero emission vehicle and therefore will be counted as a zero emission vehicle. But take the Ram Charger coming out. It's going to have a 3.6 liter engine and a 92 kilowatt battery. It's going to be heavier than Sim. It's going to have competing powertrains, but the engine is never going to provide propulsion power. It's only a generator. Now, theory is, okay, I'm never going to put a gas in. I'm going to plug it in every night. Great. It's a BEV. But everyone's going to put gas on it. They're always going to have that back end of their generator to say, what if my range goes out? Where this is smart is pickup trucks. This idea that Ford decided we'll pick a pickup truck, but we're gonna rejigger a F series to be a Lightning first, right? That's one side. The other side of the coin is clean sheet GM BEV trucks for $90,000. That is not a very valuable value proposition. And then in the middle is Stellantis. Well, what if we find out we can put some different powertrains on, doesn't allow us to kill our powertrain plant, and then we could sell it still as a zero emission vehicle. Again, a smokescreen. It's telling a story of, hey, look at my pretty zero emission vehicle when it's really not. We think extended range is going to make a big push in the future. You're going to see a lot of manufacturers say, hey, I got to push this electric vehicle. Let me drop maybe even a 600 cc engine. Let me put some generator. The Scout that's planned for Blythewood, South Carolina, that's coming out, North Carolina, South Carolina, is going to have already a extended range version. If you go on today and say I want to pre-order it, there's a BEV version and extended range version. They're already getting ahead of this plan. So we think if we're looking at powertrain mixes coming forward, you're going to see more and more play in this extended range, because the hardest part in electrification is convincing a consumer a plug is not a disruptor in their life. Doesn't matter when they're going to make themselves whole on gas prices or electrical prices, whatever. If they believe it's a disruptor, they will not buy that vehicle. And you got to get people to try to use a plug. This is not an anti-electrification story. It's pro-reality. They're great vehicles. They're just not for everybody. But because it's environmentally and governmental driven, it was being force-fed. Now, this is a short list. I have another 2 pages of this in other places where these are just the vehicles that in the last, let's say, 60 days have moved 6 to 24 months in their production life cycle, pushing their SOPs out, which then pushing their EOPs out, excuse me, which then pushes their next generation SOPs out. A lot of them are, hey, we're making money on pickup trucks now. Why are we going to invest in electrified pickup trucks? So let's push that program out. Now, on paper, makes a ton of sense. If you're a supplier and you're trying to capacitize to this number, and they're constantly are pushing this stuff out, how do you plan properly? You can't. You got to be more proactive. Too many suppliers we talk to are reactive in this market. They say, oh my God, thank God I got an RFQ. Let me go answer it. And they don't look at, wait a second, should I back this horse? And if I back this horse, what should I get in return? Should I ask for my pay for my tooling up front? Should I say, I'll give you scaled pricing because I believe the volumes are 80% less? Right? Should I walk away from it? Right? This idea of taking all the programs that come across your desk, really now you're in an area where you have to scrutinize and you have to push back and say, I have questions on the validity of this. Will you be there for me so I don't lose money in this deal? Now, tariffs. Look, it's an eye chart. Everyone's going to copy this when we're all done. But let's just talk about some of the highlights. Just-in-time border crossing is a big part of how the efficiency of a vehicle is built, and therefore the costs are cut down, which profitability goes up. So if you have just-in-time products that are crossing from Canada into the U.S. or Mexico in the U.S., and it falls within this tariff problem, this tariff issue, we have a problem. There is still a lot of gray area. There's a 25% tariff that was announced, but there's now this USMCA compliance issue. So if it's USMCA compliant, well, then can't parts and vehicles come from Canada and Mexico? So the way, depending on how you read the language, says either A, everything is 25% unless you build that stuff here and it's parts, or B, there's sort of some dispensation for crossing that border. The problem is, because it's not clear, that disruption creates that uncertainty. I've never said disruption and uncertainty so many times than I've done in the last 60 days. So when you have disruption uncertainty, you hold off on investment. This is the problem. Okay. We think powertrains will be the most impacted. Let's take in case in point to BMW's built in Spartanburg. Yes, they're built here, but their powertrains come from Europe. So they're going to get dinged with on a powertrain impact at 25%. Now, those buyers are more of a marquee buyer. So they're going to pass that on to the consumer. But here's the thing. If you're making an entry-level vehicle, you can't pass it on to consumer because these are cost-conscious buyers. They're either A, going to look at your competition, or B, you're going to push them in the used car market. And the more you push them in the used car market, guess what? Used car prices go up. And now we're in this vicious cycle. We're seeing plants that are maybe on the bubble, as I said earlier. Oakville is scheduled to get a new F-Series Super Duty. If it's not plays within the tariff thing, and you're not going to put a 25% tariff on a Super Duty truck coming in from Canada, is it worth it? Are you going to consume them all in Canada? No. Canada uses us as their larger consumer. You do have an opportunity for manufacturers that have high inventory to move that metal, but they're going to fear factor. We're back in COVID times. COVID, you want a car? Hey, you want that? But someone else wants it too. Tell you what, sticker plus market adjustment. There's going to be a lot of people in this in the consumer side that are going to be scared. They're going to run the first dealer and say, I'll take whatever you got because I'm in fear that 3 months from now or 3 weeks from now, we're going to have a significant uptick. Those vehicles are not tariff impacted yet. So, but they're going to use these vehicles as a way to sort of mitigate the pain of tariff impacted vehicles that are going to be produced. So when you talk about Stellantis, A lot of Rams, a lot of Jeeps on the lot, they can move the metal. You talk about the other side, Toyota with 40, 45 days of inventory, they're going to scrutinize which consumer is going to consume, and they're going to get the most bang of their buck. So we're telling people every consumption, do your homework, do your due diligence. Don't take the first deal you have. Sort of take your time. But if you're looking for a car and it was in the lot for, in your plan for next 3 months, I start looking today. So what are we seeing? Well, Trump is getting the results he desires. The first impact on the tariffs were border security issued, and Mexico answered first, Canada answered second. We thought it was going to be reversed, but they were ready to get there. And then he gave him a stay of execution, right? Then it was, okay, we're going to do it again. Now we have manufacturers like Honda saying we're going to move out of Mexico into Indiana for our next generation Civic. It's going to be more costly, but it's the price of doing business. Hyundai earmarking $21 billion investment. Now, some of it was pre-Trump, but now this has been accelerated with more, and faster under a Trump presidency of that 21 billion. More and more manufacturers are going to have this conversation about how do we move in the U.S. because of the uncertainty. The only way to get rid of uncertainty is take it out of the equation. And the only way to take it out of the equation is build your stuff in the United States. Now, we're not playing a big game of Sim City. We're not moving stuff around and inventing green iPhones and blue iPhones. And hey, that's great. It is a very difficult time to move stuff. You can't just assume I have capacity over here. Well, fill that capacity. Well, if that's capacity is for framed trucks, you can't put unibody vehicles in there. You need to make a significant investment or move it, and you can't just move stuff overnight. So a lot of conversation of, it's going to bring jobs here. Yeah. And business here. Yes. Overnight. Absolutely not. We're having a lot of conversation of excess capacity. Yeah, there's some excess capacity out there. But again, it's earmarked for certain products. You can't just shoehorn stuff in it at any given time. The market as well as I do it is glacial in speed. Now, what this is all doing, it's definitely setting the conversation for Kuzma or USMCA, depending on what side of the border you're talking about, to renegotiations in 26. But make no mistake, impact tariffs, all prices rise. Because if I'm going to have a competitive vehicle that goes up by some portion of that 25%, and I'm compliant over here, well, I'm going to raise my price just under that. It was the electric vehicle phenomenon all over again. I'm going to get a $7,500 credit. Well, I'm going to raise my price $7,000 because you're going to get it back anyway. So this is not we're going to get a great deal on U.S. build and highly products with U.S. content. It's going to be, here's an opportunity to make money across the board. So let's talk about that mix. That's a problem. Yes, there's redundant sources of Silverados and Sierra to offset what's going on in Oshawa and Mexico. However, 53% of that comes from Mexico. 25% of Silverado HDs come from Canada. These are their bread and butter vehicles that are super expensive as they are. Now you have your low entry vehicles that come from Mexico, the Maverick, which is a good seller for Ford, the Bronco Sport, Nissan Sentra and Versa, Honda HRV. Cost conscious products to build people to get into your brand and hopefully move you up the value chain. Now, if you task them with 25% tariff or some portion of it, it makes them less competitive. And then market leaders, the Tacoma, the RAV4 and CRV, the Equinox, Blazer, Terrain, and Maverick again. These are market leaders and are not built in the United States, or at least not the volumes they needed at. And you're going to take them from Canada and or Mexico. So now you're going to impact the ones that are making them the most money. So people say, well, it's great. Let's just move all my Equinox to the United States. That's going to take months, even if they had the capacity to do a plant that's going to house 250,000 Equinox. Okay. So this is the reality we're in right now that I know that everyone across the supply chain is trying to sort of weather. So let's talk about the manufacturers pre-tariff that we wrote that we saw as most impacted that have a North America production footprint. This is not the imports. So Nissan and Volkswagen bubble the surface. Nissan and Volkswagen have a significant amount of their North America production in Mexico. And as I said before, the Nissan product is entry-level product, cost-conscious product, which makes it very difficult. You pile on the fact of their severing with Renault and their on again, off again relationship with Honda, the removal of their CEO. Nissan's in some serious trouble. They got a lot of rethinking to do, right? You still have Hyundai, but Hyundai's still leveraging the idea of the $7,500 credit, which is going to go away eventually. But now when you talk about imported vehicles coming from South Korea, they were really taking advantage of the IRA. Now they can't because now we're talking about a substantial tariff. Okay. Toyota and Honda, a lot of the North American footprint is in Canada. So the four hurdles of EV adoption, because we always have to talk about EV adoption because it hasn't gone away. They're not walking away from this investment. They're just trying to mitigate the pain, are still in this order: cost, range, infrastructure, and we call the China effect. They are still more expensive vehicles. However, what they're doing is they're trying to say, well, why don't we just lease them? Okay, that's great. Go get a Lightning for $400 a month. Go get a Lyric for $299 a month. These are very, very attractive prices. The problem is in 3 years is, well, what's going to happen in 3 years? The residuals aren't going to make any money. You're going to throw it into the used car market. So it's just the manufacturer trying to build a nice $45,000 competitive BEV. Now you're going to have very nice used BEVs that are going to be cheaper in the used car market. And here we go again with another bubble. Range is still an issue. It has definitely come down, but range is an optics issue. All they got to do is hear one story of I was stranded. I forgot to go out. It's pouring rain to plug it in. I went from Pennsylvania to Orlando for my family. It took me 3 days. All you got to hear is one of them, and people are going to walk away. It's not the majority of the story. Most BEVs are coming out with 250 miles of range and then some, but it's still in the optics side. Infrastructure is still a problem, especially when funding for infrastructure got pulled. Even when there was funding, it wasn't getting used properly. And we already knew that a substantial, 33% of all plugs weren't even working out there. And the China effect is driving everyone to say, oh, the big bad China's coming with highly competitive product because we've been teaching them how to do it for the last 3 decades. Right? They're going to be, and so what you're going to see is China is coming, and we're trying everything in our power to keep them away. Yes, we had China earmarked for BYD coming into Mexico. We're going to keep pushing that out because Mexico will constantly play with the US. And the conversation is keep the Chinese out so we can build our market here. We're going to get constantly pushed out. But make no mistake, the Chinese are coming. It's not if, it's a when. And when the Chinese come, you got to remind yourself, every manufacturer other than Tesla is losing money in BEVs. When the Chinese come, they're already profitable. And they're going to want market share first, and they're going to want profitability second. As long as they get market share, they will buy that market share, and the profitability will come. So globally, we keep on dying on this now. Just under a third of all vehicles by 2031 will be fully electrified, but a healthy balance of standard hybrids and plug-in hybrids and a little bit of growth in the extended range. The problem is it puts 292 million units on the road that all need infrastructure. So now we're back in that slide. It says, hey, infrastructure is a problem. Right now it's a problem, but we don't have a lot of vehicles on the road. Just imagine when there's almost 300 million on the road. If you look at North America, this keeps getting dialed down only because they can't walk away from this investment. They have to get it out there smarter. Standard hybrids are still the lion's share of electrified powertrains out there, and that'll be like that through 2026 and cresting and maybe in 27, with the introduction of more extended range vehicles coming as well. If you talk about BEV leaders, and we look about brand owners, we say brand owner because, Volkswagen, Stellantis, a dozen and 14 different brands underneath their umbrella. So that's why they look so big, because they have very dedicated brands for the markets they play with globally. And yes, Volkswagen and Stellantis will be at the lead, but if you broke them down, their brands won't be in the lead, right? Because they're all going to have a piece of this pie. And BYD and Geely and Tesla, right, is fifth. If you look at a new energy vehicle perspective, which that's the way you have to look at things for electrification, anything with a plug, because you got to convince people to say, how can I get that plug in your hand? And hopefully the next vehicle you buy is a battery electric vehicle. BYD is crushing everybody globally in terms of their market share. And they continue to be the leader, maybe not crushing leader, but the leader through 31. BYD is going to be the force to be reckoned with on a global basis. They're walking into Europe. They're looking at Eastern Europe for manufacturing footprint and then feed into Europe. Europe can't really put huge tariffs on China because there's so much intertwined with them with their joint ventures in there that they can't punish them because they'll get punished at the same time. So there's a lot of things going on. But BYD, they're going to be knocking on your door supply side, and they're going to be promising very large numbers. As with any manufacturer, go with eyes wide open and scrutinize and do your due diligence. But they're going to be the one to force to reckon with. They're going to come with a very competitive product. They're going to come with a 101,000 mile warranty. Basically go over Hyundai. They're going to learn and they're going to keep on going. Case in point, Hyundai. Hyundai in the 1990s product, it was junk, right? It was laughed out of the market. It was buy one, get one free. Now today, force to be reckoned with. They win all the awards. They have a great product, great pricing, great technology, and they listen to the consumer with every iteration of their vehicle build. That's what the Chinese are going to do. They're going to bring a product, they're going to listen, and they're going to adapt. They're going to try to change the optics of the consumer going, oh, the Chinese aren't this big bad wolf. Come on in. We're very accepting. Let's get them all in. Until they're going to work with the supply base in North America, generation one, and then generation two, they're going to bring their suppliers over. Same models of Japanese, same models of Korean manufacturers. That's the way of doing business. If you look at North America opportunity, like I said, BYD, top of the list. They deal the whole BZ series for Toyota from the wheels up. They want to push for Mexico and Canada sales. They're selling in Mexico as we speak. Chery has always been trying the importer model. They're going to plant their flag a lot in South America and hopefully use it as a launching pad into North America. Geely, I always say this every time. A lot of people forget that Volvo is Chinese owned, right? Lincoln Co., Polestar, brands that are dedicated to a consumer group. Really, really focused. SAIC is everywhere in the world but here, so they're soon to be here. And VinFast is its own case study. If VinFast actually starts, they keep on delaying, and they actually build market share, it is the nail in the coffin for brand equity. I'm not saying it's a bad vehicle, but when you talk about a manufacturer that is a Vietnamese car builder, got into BEVs, let's say last year, decides he wants to be the next, he's basically the Elon of Vietnam. He wants to come over here. If people start building that, then the whole idea of brand equity goes out the door, and it's all about what a consumer likes at that time. And then don't take long, you got to pay attention to the contract manufacturers. Foxconn's trying to make a move. They try to make a move. There was one rumor they tried to make a move to be the Nissan partner. And then, Japan say, wait a second, we've learned our lesson, Japanese company, Japanese home. Stop partnering with non-Japanese firms. So everything's on the table. So if we look at the powertrain mix from a Detroit 3 perspective, everything other than green here needs an internal combustion engine. Even with our view, you're going to get to about 50% of the vehicles that they build by the end of the decade at GM or ICE with a really healthy balance of electrified non-BEV. Ford, the same path. Stellantis, more balance, a lot more to offer, really trying to reinvent themselves with extended range or even playing a little bit in the fuel cell business. So they're trying to really get out of the way. They probably have they have very difficult relationships with a lot of suppliers. They're really trying to reinvigorate how to move forward with their product set. There was rumors they're going to kill the Hemi. We said nope, that's so stupid. Now that says we're going to bring that Hemi back. All right. BMW, when you look at the European brands, different story because these are more marquee brands. A consumer, if they want it, they're going to buy it. And yes, these brands will have the tariff applied directly to the consumer. They will eat this cost. If you want the product, you're going to pay for it. Geely through Volvo is the only manufacturer in North America, other than Tesla, obviously, that goes pure BEV. The Asian-based manufacturers have always gone on a different path, a little more reserved, a little more sit back, see what happens. Honda's on a very interesting path. They're making a really substantial push in the BEVs. There's some products in there that we just don't quite understand why they're doing it, but they've always been a powertrain company that just so happens to build cars. So they're going to push a little more into this space, right? But things like they're getting out of building the Odyssey, right? They're going to leave the minivans to basically a Sienna and a Pacifica. That's it. But the Odyssey that they build in Japan is not the same one over here. So it's not like we're importing. They're going to start walking away from those businesses. Subaru, can only build, doesn't have a lot of capacity here, so they build what people want, and there's no electrification. If they use electrification, they're going to use a relationship with Toyota. Nissan and Hyundai, a little more bigger push in the electrification and BEV space. And then the Toyota Mazda relationships, a lot less BEV push, a much bigger push into hybridization. I mean, we always said, for the Prius, you could have rode that right into the electrification sunset. And they said, nope, this is not where we want to be. We want to actually be in fuel cells. They admitted they missed the mark, but they didn't miss it that far because now that the pendulum's swinging back. If you put things in perspective, there was 46 unique nameplates offered in North America that were BEVs. In our plan, we're talking about 124. Do we think all 124 exist? No. But can we just shoot the ones we don't like? We can't, but we can give them low volume until they start justifying themselves. And when you give manufacturers low volume, then you might not be able to justify a plant or the labor behind that plant, right? So, we never believed the lightning story, even though that was not that one. The idea of a lightning is they were telling their suppliers 250,000 a year. We said no way, it's 50. We were wrong. It was 30. So, this idea of really scrutinizing every manufacturer's gonna come in with a number that's 150,000 a year. That's the new bellwether, right? It used to be 50,000 a year. Ooh, 50,000 must be a real product. But we see the business plans. We see the fact that the manufacturers put in their BEV numbers above and beyond their non-BEV numbers. They don't cannibalize themselves. So either A, they believe they're going to cannibalize all their competition, or believe they're going to get market share that doesn't exist yet overnight. Neither are true. They just want to make sure their suppliers are lined up to, I need the capacity to do that. Will you be my supplier of choice? How can Tesla pull it off? He's got 9 nameplates by the end of the decade across the whole world. Right now, 7. If you take that volume and you look at what he produces, you're talking about upwards of 250,000 units per year per nameplate. That is a sustainable business model. Competitively, over 800 BEVs are going to be offered by the end of the decade, and all under 50,000 units a year until they prove themselves. An unsustainable business model. Tesla's definitely on its own pedestal. Yes, having difficulties with its relationship with the White House, but at the end of the day, that's going to balance out. In terms of BEVs in North America, the short list of the ones that are making the most, over 100,000, Tesla, GM, Ford, usual suspects. On the other side of the coin, yes, we still have BYD in this chart. We're going to keep pulling that back as they move out. But I'm telling you, it's not if, it's when. Now, the problem with production is, okay, lots and lots of capacity that's not underutilized for electrification. So that on top of the gray, which we always joke about, these are the optimists that believe, 7 years flying cars will be zipping around. But even with the optimists, a good percentage of the vehicles in the world need an internal combustion engine. Okay. I don't mean to pick on GM. I just bring this up because this is reality and because they're such a large volume player. This is what they were telling their suppliers back in 23 of what they want. Before 23 of EVs they wanted to build. Actuals on the right-hand side. Couple highlights. 96,000 Hummers, they built less than 10% at 5,600 Hummers. 90,000 Lyrics, 21,000. 82,000 Bolt EUVs, 50,000. Now, if you were a supplier targeting this capacity, the answer was, sorry, market conditions changed. We can't supply this. You go, yeah, but I have capacity. Sorry. So, now you got to look at it as how do you basically get away from that for those next generational programs and walking with eyes wide open. Inventory numbers, you're talking about, we always thought COVID was sort of a nice reset because they were making great money because the inventory was low. Why go back to high inventory? Keep it at a respectable, let's say 45-day level, and then make your cars get more margin per car. Nope. They decided that, as long as Hyundai goes back and fills their lots, everyone else is going to fill their lot. So this is constantly on the rise about inventory and days hands on supply. So inventory discipline has gone out the window. Problem is a lot of this inventory also has BEVs and aren't moving. In terms of light vehicle sales, we're going to constantly, unfortunately, dial this thing down. We're talking about high watermark in the U.S., 17.5 million units, and now we're going to be, that's 16.27. I think we've already dialed that down. We're going to be probably sub 16 going in this market, probably a little worse than last year. I think we'll have an artificial push in the next couple of months. People are going to be scared and they're going to say, let me get my car right now, and we'll see what happens. But then if I'm trying to look at this from a forecaster, there's going to be, hey, look at all the car sales. Now we're going to pull back some of the tariffs for at least for Canada and Mexico. I highlight Canada on here sometimes because we have some Canadian counterparts on these calls. similar path, leveling off kind of conversation. We talk about this idea of China and if they're coming, well, they're here. 7.3% of all vehicles sold in Mexico last year, or last year, were Chinese branded vehicles. Nearly 20% were imported from China. Now, that 20% will probably drop, but when you say, hey, the Chinese are coming, the Chinese are here. They're using Mexico as their launching pad. And by the way, this is BAIC, Chery, JIC, MG. This doesn't have any BYD numbers in it yet. Because BYD, although they say they're selling in Mexico and we know they're zipping around, aren't reporting their numbers. If you took a BEV sales outlook, we're going to this constantly gets nickeled down a little bit. About 25% of all vehicles sold, the 25% market share basically by the end of the decade. But the only way you get there is a healthy balance of entry and luxury. You can't have $130,000 crab walking vehicles as your business model or $90,000 pickup trucks. You have to have a sweet spot 45 or 37 or 35,000. So Rivian's coming out to R2 and then R3 at the 45,000 mark. You're going to have to build more brand loyalty to keep people in because you have a different type of consumer out there today than there was in the past. So just a few summary slides to get through it, and we'll open up to some dialogue here. Look, this new consumer we mentioned, brand loyalty is eroding. You will have a consumer out there that's more socially and emotionally and motivated. Their influencer is giving them guidance on a vehicle that may have no existence, or there may be a handful of them made. But because their influencer is telling them check it out, it bubbles to the surface. It bubbles to the top of the list of something they want to pay attention to. Doesn't take in 100 and 120 years of the successful building of cars. So that opens the doors to more players. Less trim variants are definitely a change. Instead of offering 7 trim levels and having an entry, you see a lot of manufacturers go, boom, we're going to get rid of those first 2, and we're going to force people into technology packages, so their entry level is a much higher price than it was in the past. A little more difficult for suppliers that sort of like trim variants. If they have parts, hey, I can do different colored, fascias or handles, whatever it is. But it's cutting out those less affordable options. Subscription-based revenue is a real thing. This is not about I'm sharing a car with you. This is about over-the-air updates. So now, if I'm a car manufacturer and I sell a car, and that car eventually gets sold into the used car market, and it's got OnStar, it's got Sirius, it's got technology or whatever that I can update that consumer. And it doesn't have to be electric, mind you. It just has over the air. I have a revenue stream in a secondary market that I didn't have in the past. So if my goal was profitability as a vehicle manufacturer, which that's it. Shareholders are the only their only customer. We as consumers are a means to an end. Okay. That means basically that we are looking at a fact of people looking at this going, okay, yes, I know I'm going to keep that market, but if I'm a manufacturer, I can pull back my manufacturing footprint and still make money. That's a great business model. If you're a supplier, very bad business model because they won't need the parts. China, it's not if, it's not, it is when. Tariffs are going to be this idea of holding them back, but the tariffs aren't going to hold China back, right? This idea of border security and cybersecurity and all the other things, that's going to hold them back. But China's when you have a $13,000 BYD seal and you put 100% on it, let's say you sell for 30 here, right? Okay. You're still the lowest cost one out there. They're not going to do that. They're going to basically go in and they're going to say, I want to buy market share. Supply chain, there's going to be some short-term pain and possibly some mid-term pain. But this idea is you have to evaluate all your production footprints, where you're getting products inside the U.S., where you're getting products outside the U.S., and how that fits in your business model, and how you can work with your end customer. Very, very difficult to add for the suppliers to do. You're going to see a lot of reevaluation of just-in-time processes, a lot more vertical integration, like Honda, whether they're going to still do it or not, $15 billion in Canada. They're going to own in the dirt all the way up to the final vehicle when it comes to electric vehicles. And program extension delays, biggest problem we're seeing out there. Every day, hey, we're delaying this program another 5 years. Well, here's the thing. If you're in a 5-year program and they decide to go, we're going to two more years, you have may already allotted capacity to a different customer already for that, and you can't give them that. Or B, you can't give them the same pricing you did because when you made the pricing 5 years ago, you were profitable in year 5. You weren't profitable year in 6 and 7, especially when you tack on a tariff. This is where the idea of, hey, we're going to extend profitable vehicles becomes very difficult because without the suppliers, they got nothing. Look, electrification, I've had it sounded like a lot of doom and gloom. It's here to stay. It's too big to fail. It's going to make its way through it. You're going to see prices coming down. You're going to see more options. You're going to see more people going in. It's not going to be this, 45-degree growth curve like people were expecting. It's going to be one arrow in the quiver of powertrain of an automotive, right? We've already got the early adopters. Now we're in the mass market movers. They're more focused on the cost and the range. And the Trump era policy is going to be disruptive because if there's no more money to incentivize them at $7,500, it may pull people out of the market. The existing players know they cannot do this alone. They have to build partnerships. We're talking about GM and Honda, GM and Ford. GM talking about doing commercial vehicles or cargo vans with Hyundai. Honda and Nissan on and off relationship. Honda and Sony with the Afeela brand. Volkswagen and Rivian. I mean, Volkswagen and Rivian are going to have competing products. They're going to use the brains of the Rivian on their Scout. So they put $5 billion in it, and all of a sudden here comes the R2 and R3, which are pretty close competitors to the Scout. But there's a reality out there. When new players come in this market, they are truly unexperienced. The U.S. market is different than any other market in the whole world in terms of play. It's the holy grail for manufacturers to come to. So they're going to look for the suppliers that are going to hold their hand and guide them through it. The question is, can you guide them enough where you're going to build a long-term relationship, or are they going to use you as a launching pad to bring in their families to get the rest of the products done in program life cycle 2 and 3? That's an unknown. However, it's pretty logical they're going to do it because every other manufacturer does it. But there's plans, there's execution. So there's opportunity out there for new players when they hit this market. If you're a supplier on it, you just have to take that opportunity and really say, what does it mean and how can I live with it potentially short term, if not long term? I want to thank you for your time. Everyone's going to get a copy of this, but I do want to open up the floor to any kind of discussions.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Mhm.
Uh, for anyone that has a question, we would love to hear from you. If you would like to put it in the chat, that would be great. Or even you can unmute yourself and ask a question of Joe. Surprisingly, Joe, we don't have questions.
We answered them all.
Absolutely.
Great. I love that.
I have a question for you, which is everybody is waiting to see how the tariffs actually go into effect next in the next couple of weeks. The tariffs on autos went into place today. At what point do you see it as the new reality and therefore everybody does start shifting versus the wait and see that I feel like a lot of companies are in right now? Is it, the 90 days when we've exhausted inventory levels, or is it further out where the customer sort of recalibrates what they think a car should cost?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's going to be product specific, right? So you will have entry level products and marquee products, different types of consumers, how they're going to hit it. I think a lot of people are going to play. There's a fear factor in here. People go, oh, if I need a car next 6 months, I'm going to go get it today, which we're going to see then a bubble. A nice, oh, hey, look how sales are going. And then they're going to level off because, as you said, when that inventory gets exhausted, now you have tariff impacted vehicles. When you heard stories of Honda already saying, fine, we'll move up to Greensburg. That was a big move. I think people are taking the president at face value and saying this is what he wants to get done, and I need to prepare because it's going to happen in some capacity. Right now we're talking about the pain today. USMCA comes up in 26. That might really carve out the stone of what this plan is in the future about how things are made across North America. Do I think it's a mistake to tariff Canada and Mexico 25%? Absolutely. We're a highly integrated supply chain. But you're going to have people really look at this and you're going to see those tariffs are going to hit people pretty fast. I mean, when you're talking about just-in-time products, that thing crossing borders, that's a problem. So I think you got to take it. I think the risk was, He couldn't say no again because then he'd be looked at as the boy who cried wolf. He said, "Oh, you're going to give us another 30-day stay of execution. We'll tell you we're going to do something. We're not going to do it." I think people are taking his word and going, "Okay, we have to go." If he is willing to do some of the reciprocal tariffs were less punitive, let's say they were, hey, they're asking for X and we're asking for 20% less than X. Okay, in some cases. So he is showing his cards in terms of he's willing to work. So if you're a vehicle manufacturer and you got your own lobbyists, which they all do, they're all knocking on the door of the White House going, okay, here's what I plan to do. Now can I have a dispensation? And you're going to see a lot of that language come. You're going to see a lot of investment come. Again, not overnight. We're being asked the question, hey, what capacity is out there that's open? Yeah, there's capacity. It's just, trying to, square peg, round hole kind of
Right.
capacity.
We do have a question. Have you heard of any efforts for BYD to produce vehicles in the US?
No. I mean, right now, no. Mexico was their earmark. They were coming in late 26 to Mexico. The writing was on the wall. The the ball was in motion at that point. Keep on pulling my cliches, but um, building in here, it's going to be tough. Now, if you're BYD and you know you're a juggernaut and you want to buy love on a U.S. consumer, I think it's a great idea. If you have to lose money on vehicles, so what? Build here, build yourself a loyalty program. Koreans did, the Japanese did, the Germans did it. There's no reason why the Chinese aren't going to do it. So, yes, there's always rumblings of you should come here and build. The issue here, though, is they're still going to need their supply chain from China. So they got to come in. They got to come in as allies. They got to come in and say, not only going to build here, but we're going to use North America parts. See how much we love you, and then build that brand up.
So following up on that, the additional question was, has BYD's supply strategy in Europe been to source steel components locally, or are they bringing that all in from China?
They're going to bring it in, but they're going to use Eastern Europe as a place for manufacturing locations. So I think they're looking at Turkey, um, and maybe even Egypt, I think was on the mark, but somewhere where they can be outside the EU, but still then supply the EU easily from a logistics standpoint, and therefore, not getting hit with major tariffs from China. But yeah, it's going to be a combination. It's going to be a combination. Right now, they're importing their vehicles. They're going to be putting facilities there. They're using China, most of the Chinese parts, but they're going to have to start building a healthy balance of local community parts because again, they have to shift the optics of the consumer to you're not just China coming in and trying to steal it. You're actually building jobs here. You're creating economies here. So that's going to be their game on this one.
Switching to Canada for a minute, how does the tariff impact the short-term production plan for Ontario's manufacturing operation?
Yeah, I mean,
And
so
how likely could these plants' products be shifted into the US?
yeah,
Going
I
back
mean,
to the past
Stellantis is going to be shut
question.
down for 2 weeks. They've already announced that could be longer. The ones we're paying attention to are Brampton and Oakville because they're sort of retooling mode for next generation Jeep Compasses and and Super Duties. And look, if you're a U.S. brand and you're saying here, and I'm going to play ball, and I want the president to work with me, and you then go and say, but we're going to keep this future investment in Canada alive, it's not going to help your story. So we are tracking that one on a daily basis. We have a lot of clients in Canada that are keeping them up at night about what's going to go on with that capacity. I would say it is at risk, in all honesty. Um, I would not say it's 100%, but it's enough at risk where people should pay attention to if they're being asked to build on products to build that, building in some safeguards that if it walked away or went somewhere else, could you still survive?
Any additional questions from the audience? Uh, Question for me, do you think used car pricing gets to the pandemic levels that we saw where the price imbalance there, used cars were increasing more rapidly than new car prices?
Yes, 100% yes. Look, tariff is a great way for everyone to make money, whether you're getting impacted or not. So yes, the used car market knows that people are going to be looking at them. So they're looking at used car prices. Hey, that one's 32,000. Mine's now 31 because it's going to be fear factoring on what I need to get a car. So absolutely.
I think we have one more question here. What are the disadvantages of
E-revs.
EREVs? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a great question. We don't know yet. The only real E-revs in the market in the past were the old BMW i3, the little, 600cc motorcycle engine in it. Really, but when you're talking about a 3.6 liter engine to that big battery for the Ram Charger, uh, the answer is we don't know yet. It's such a fresh idea, but it allows them to continue down this path. There could be some heavy maintenance. I mean, there's no way it's going to be any less than the normal maintenance we have and all recalls we have on our existing vehicles. And if you don't have a recall on your vehicle, then you got to keep looking because every vehicle's got some sort of recall because every car is crowdsourced. They put it on the market and say, "You tell me when it breaks." So you're talking about this interesting technology of a generator, this idea of a very large engine with a pretty substantial battery. Um, it is not viewed as being any easier. Let's put it that way. But there's no metrics on it yet about what that serviceability on those are going to be.
I think that's all the questions for today. So thank you, Joe, for your presentation, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. We will have these slides out to all the attendees in the next day or so, and the taped version will be up later this week as well. Please note that all of our emerging technology webinars for 2025 are available on demand and on AGMA's website. The next webinar in this series will be on May 8th, so please join us at 1 p.m. for Uncovering the Real Trajectory of the Humanoid Robot Market with Interact Analysis. On behalf of everyone at the team here at AGMA, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, everyone.